You are tuned to Community Radio Networks. After the long Memorial Day weekends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is Tuesday, the 28th of May, and we are here today to get this short week started for you with all the information that you need. Right here on Community Radio Networks. And we'll start with world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Madgil. 4 days after the huge landslide in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, only 6 bodies have been recovered from the masses of rock about 8 meters deep. The United Nations said today that the total affected population, which includes those in need of possible evacuation, is estimated at 7,849, with some 42% of them under the age of 16. The number of bodies recovered is expected to increase as retrieval efforts continue amidst challenges due to unstable landslide conditions. At least 2,000 people fear to have been buried alive in this landslide in the South Pacific island nation of Papua New Guinea. The unverified estimate from the nation's government reported roughly triple the UN's estimate of 670 people killed in the landslide since Friday, and at least 150 homes have been buried in debris, and 5 bodies so far were recovered from that area where these homes were. The UN International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to halt military action and any other operations that may lead to the loss of civilian life in the Gaza city of Rafah. The decision is the latest in a case brought by South Africa accusing Israel of genocide against the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip, a charge that Israel has strongly rejected. Global diplomatic pressure on Israel to halt its onslaught in Rafah mounted as Israeli forces persisted in bombarding the southern Gaza city, entering its central quarters for the first time today. Israel pounded Rafah with airstrikes and tank fire, pressing its offensive in Gaza's southern city, despite international condemnation of an attack that sparked a blaze in a tent camp for the displaced, killing at least 45 people. Israeli troops have been sighted in the city center in southern Gaza after the Israeli airstrike in the area reportedly killed dozens. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel was investigating that incident in which scores of civilians were killed in Israeli airstrikes near the southern Gaza city of Rafah. And he says the strike which killed these scores of displaced Palestinians was a tragic mishap amid growing international condemnation of the blast. At least 45 people killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and hundreds more were treated for severe burns, fractures, and shrapnel wounds. Israel faced a wave of international condemnation over this strike, and Gaza officials said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war against Hamas amid international condemnation. Gaza's health ministry has said that at least 36,096 people have been killed in the territory during more than 7 months of fighting between Israel and Hamas, and more than 1 million have been displaced in the last 20 days as fighting rages across Gaza. The Israeli military has said that it had struck a number of terrorist targets linked to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon also. Spain's left-wing government formally announced the recognition of a Palestinian state today after the decision was made last week, along with Norway and Ireland. Spain and Norway formally recognizing a Palestinian state, with Ireland following suit in this decision slammed by Israel as a reward for Hamas more than 7 months into the devastating Gaza conflict. About 10,000 people took part in a demonstration near the Israeli embassy in Paris against Israel's deadly shelling of the Gaza city of Rafah, and Canada said it would grant temporary visas to 5,000 Gazan residents under a special program for Canadians' relatives living in the enclave, a preparatory move in case they are able to leave in the future. The Biden administration told Israel to take every precaution to protect civilians after the military strike in Rafah killed dozens of Palestinians, as it faced calls from some fellow Democrats to halt military shipments to Israel. Following the deadly airstrike by Israel near Rafah in the Gaza Strip, the U.S. government says it is in dialogue with the Israeli army and partners on the ground to clarify the circumstances. President Biden honored fallen soldiers during the 156th observance of Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery outside the nation's capital yesterday. He placed a wreath of flowers at the tomb of the unknown soldier in a solemn ceremony where he was accompanied by Vice President Kamala Harris and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Earlier in the day, he hosted a White House breakfast in honor of Memorial Day that included administration officials, military leadership, veterans, and so-called Gold Star family members, referring to those who have lost an immediate relative in military action. The Memorial Day ceremony, the latest in a string of events where President Biden is focused on active and retired military personnel, including delivering the commencement speech at the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, New York. And next week, the president will travel to Normandy in France to participate in ceremonies marking the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and expected to give a major speech about the heroism of Allied forces in World War II and the continuing threats to democracy today. And it is this week on Thursday that he will mark the 9th anniversary of the death of his son, Bo, who served in Iraq as part of Delaware's National Guard. Bo died of glioblastoma, a highly aggressive form of brain cancer that his father believes was possibly a consequence of exposure to military burn pits in Iraq. President Biden marking Memorial Day with a pledge that the country would continue the work of the nations fallen towards a perfect union for which they lived and for which they died, as he delivered remarks at the solemn remembrance ceremony at the Arlington National Cemetery. Former Representative Patrick Kennedy endorsed President Biden for the White House over his cousin Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s third-party bid. And over the past week, Donald Trump rallied alongside two rap artists accused of conspiracy to commit murder. He promised to commute the sentence of a notorious internet drug dealer, and he appeared backstage with another rap artist who has pleaded guilty to assault for punching a female fan. As he awaits the conclusion of his Manhattan trial, closing arguments are set for today, and a verdict could arrive as soon as this week. And he used the week-long break from court to align himself with defendants and convicted criminals charged by the same system with which he is at war. Former President Trump's Manhattan criminal trial entering its final stage today as defense lawyers and prosecutors deliver their closing arguments in a last attempt to sway the 12 New Yorkers who will decide his fate. And these prosecutors and defense lawyers in that hush money trial are set to deliver the closing arguments to the jury today, each side looking to score final points with the panel before it starts deliberating the fate of the first former American president to be charged with felony crimes. Powerful storms killed at least 23 people, injured hundreds, and left a wide trail of destruction across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kentucky, and some in Virginia, obliterating homes and destroying a truck stop where dozens sought shelter in a restroom during the latest deadly weather to strike the central United States. And the storms inflicted their worst damage in a region spanning from north of Dallas to the northwest corner of Arkansas. At least 7 people died here in Texas, and close to 100 were injured, and more than 200 structures destroyed as a result of these severe storms in North Texas over the weekend. This was confirmed by Governor Greg Abbott during a press conference on Sunday, and his thoughts were with the family in Valley View who lost 2 children during the tornado, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. Denton, Collin, Cook, and Montague counties have been added to the state disaster declaration signed by Governor Greg Abbott, bringing the total to 106 counties. Relief workers fanning across Cook and Collin counties in the aftermath of these deadly storms. And Texas voters, meanwhile, will return to the polls today to vote in the state's primary election runoffs all over the state, impacting how the Texas legislature looks when it convenes in January. Maybe none more so than the effort by the state's top elected officials to oust Speaker of the House Dade Phelan, who is headed to a runoff against David Covey in the House District 21. And U.S. Representative Tony Gonzalez of Texas is out to save his job today in the GOP primary runoff that has put rifts within the party on display. Louisiana has become the first U.S. state to criminalize possession of abortion medication under certain circumstances after Governor Jeff Landry signed into law a bill reclassifying abortion medication as controlled substances. Legendary basketball star Bill Walton passed away yesterday, succumbing to a prolonged battle with cancer at the age of 71. He was known for both his Hall of Fame career on the court and his award-winning broadcasting performances while calling games. And Richard Sherman, two-time Oscar winner, who collaborated with brother Robert Sherman on the songs for Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and the enduring Disneyland tune It's a Small World, has died at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Beverly Hills due to age-related illness. He was 95 years old. American rapper Nicki Minaj was held by police at Amsterdam's Schiphol airport on allegations of possession of soft drugs. Dutch military confirmed that the 41-year-old American had been held for possession of soft drugs, adding it was prohibited to take such substances out of the Netherlands. And the arrest had led to her cancellation of a show in Manchester in England. A United Airlines flight was forced to abort takeoff at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport yesterday when one of its engines caught fire, sending thick plumes of smoke gushing from one of the wings. And the incident occurred on United Flight 2091, an Airbus 320, which was scheduled to fly to Seattle. An Ohio billionaire has announced plans to visit the Titanic site in a submersible just months after the Titan submersible tragedy to demonstrate improved safety in the industry. Larry Connor, a real estate investor from Dayton, intends to descend over 12,400 feet to the wreckage in a two-person submersible accompanied by Triton Submarines co-founder Patrick Leahy. Nearly a week after a Singapore Airlines flight from Heathrow Airport hit severe turbulence over the Indian Ocean, leaving at least one British passenger dead and 20 others injured, 6 crew members and 6 passengers traveling on a Qatar Airways flight from Doha to Ireland suffered injuries during a bout of turbulence this past Sunday. However, the flight, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, landed shortly before 1 p.m., according to the Dublin airport. Qatar Airways said in a statement that a small number of passengers and crew sustained minor injuries during the flight and were receiving medical attention. U.S. and allied intelligence officials are tracking an increase in low-level sabotage operations in Europe that they say are part of a Russian campaign to undermine support for Ukraine's war effort. Last week, Russian President Putin signed a decree that would allow Russia to claim U.S. assets in retaliation for any Russian assets confiscated in the U.S. And this move comes as the group of 7 nations continue to negotiate how to leverage around the $300 billion worth of sovereign Russian assets frozen in the West to aid Ukraine in its defense against Russia's unprovoked invasion. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg argued that Ukraine should be able to use American weapons to strike inside Russian territory in an apparent break with the Biden administration. And the death toll rose after a Russian strike on a crowded DIY hard store in Kharkiv, which also injured dozens of people. Local officials said at least 120 people were in the epicenter hypermarket when 2 guided bombs struck, causing a massive fire. And at least 10 of the dead were unidentified as of yesterday. President Putin signaling this week that he's open to peace talks should be viewed with vast overshadowing caveats and the weight of Ukraine's and the West's past experience of Russian diplomacy. European Union defense ministers meeting in Brussels today to discuss military aid to Ukraine as well as efforts to strengthen Europe's defense industry. The Baltic states announced plans alongside Norway, Finland, and Poland to construct a drone wall along their shared borders with Russia. And it is Ukrainian President Zelensky who secured from Spain a pledge of additional air defense missiles to help fight the about 3,000 bombs that he says Russia launches every month at Ukraine in the 3rd year of the war. The Dutch government has said it will lead an initiative among some European countries to supply a Patriot air defense missile system to Ukraine. And Ukrainian President Zelensky signed a bilateral long-term security pact with Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo in Brussels this morning. The Czech government has reacted favorably to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's call for Ukraine to be allowed to use Western weapons to strike inside Russian territory. And President Zelensky appealed for US President Biden and China Xi Jinping to participate in a planned peace summit in Switzerland next month. Moscow has invited the Taliban to its biggest annual economic forum and is considering a proposal to remove the group from its terror list. Planned talks between Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog aimed at breaking the impasse over Tehran's nuclear program have been put on hold after the death of President Ibrahim Raisi. And this temporary suspension of talks between Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency comes as its chief, Rafael Grossi, reiterated his concern over public statements made in Iran regarding its nuclear weapons capability. Iraq's interior minister and police stated that 2 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants had been attacked in Baghdad over the past 48 hours. The attacks damaged the restaurant, however, no injuries were reported. And KFC did not immediately comment on these attacks. A merchant vessel of the Yemeni coast took on water and tilted to one side after being targeted with 3 missiles, according to British security firm Amberey this morning. The vessel issued a distress call stating it had sustained damage to the cargo hold and was taking on water about 54 nautical miles southwest of Yemen's port city of Hodeida. Rafael Nadal's illustrious French Open career came to a likely end with his first-ever defeat in the opening round by Alexander Zverev yesterday after Iga Swiatek made a winning start in a bid for a 4th title. Nadal matched world number 4 Zverev for long periods on a packed court, Philippe Chatrier, but slipped to a 6-3, 7-6, 6-3 loss as he was beaten for just the 4th time in 116 matches at the tournament. He turns 38 next week, showed all his trademark fighting qualities in a gripping match, but only managed to convert 2 of 11 break points against an inspired opponent. Europe is at crossroads, French President Macron said while on a visit to the German city of Dresden. Speaking on the front of the city's Church of Our Lady, he called for a strong and sovereign Europe. Europe is a history of peace, prosperity, and democracy, but all of this was under threat if Europe did not act. And the number of people granted German citizenship reached the highest level last year since records began in 2000. Pope Francis used a highly derogatory term towards the LGBT community as he reiterated in a closed-door meeting with Italian bishops that gay people should not be allowed to become priests. For the first time in over a decade, 270 Syrians have traveled on a direct flight early this morning from Damascus to Saudi Arabia for the annual Islamic Hajj pilgrimage. The development is part of an ongoing thaw in relations between Damascus and Riyadh, which days ago appointed Saudi Arabia's first ambassador to war-torn Syria since severing ties in 2012. International donors meeting in Brussels committed 7.5 billion euros in both grants and loans to support Syrians battered by war, poverty, and hunger for the rest of this year and beyond. And South Africans will vote tomorrow to decide whether their country will take its most significant political step since the moment 30 years ago when it brought down apartheid and achieved democracy. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa faces the prospect of his ruling party's worst election result ever, yet he's still likely to be re-elected as leader of Africa's most advanced country after tomorrow's national vote. South Africa's main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, made its final appeal to voters to help it unseat the ruling African National Congress as it concluded its campaign ahead of elections this week. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. And a bipartisan congressional delegation from the United States met Taiwan's new president in Taipei yesterday and reiterated Washington's strong support for the democratic island. China's Eastern Theater Command released a simulation video of its missile forces carrying out a mass attack on Taiwan, boasting its land, sea, and air launch capabilities. The 70-second hype video used a mix of computer-generated animation and live footage to depict warships, land-based rocket launchers, and jet fighters launching waves of missiles at the island. China hit back at the group of 7 nations over their criticism of Beijing's global trade practices, accusing members of exaggerating the threat of overcapacity posed by the world's second-largest economy. China will host Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as well as a number of other Arab leaders in Beijing this week. And a tiny NASA satellite was launched from New Zealand with the mission of improving climate change prediction by measuring heat escaping from the Earth's poles for the first time. North Korea's latest satellite launch ended in a mid-air explosion as Pyongyang said that hours after its announcement of the planned projectile was criticized by Seoul and Tokyo. The launch of the Malagyeong-11 reconnaissance satellite exploded in the air during the first flight and failed to launch. Millions of individuals in low-lying areas across Bangladesh and some in India surveyed tangled wreckage left behind by a powerful cyclone. The climate-related event killed at least 16 people, destroyed thousands of homes, smashed seawalls, and flooded cities. Gusts of wind and torrential rain continued to hammer the residents as they tried to salvage whatever remained of their belongings, and this was only a day after Cyclone Remal made landfall with fierce gales and crushing waves. We do also have Indians making up the highest number of people, 250,000, to immigrate to Britain last year. Of these, 127,000 came to work and 115 came to study, and 9,000 came for other reasons. The next largest nationality to immigrate were Nigerian, then Chinese, and then Pakistani. Virendra Sharma, Britain's veteran Indian origin member of parliament and a vocal advocate of closer India-UK relations over the years, has announced his decision to step back from frontline politics and not seek re-election in the United Kingdom. The world is in a tense situation as ongoing conflicts are not likely to end so quickly, and in this scenario, India needs a strong and powerful leader with standing and respect and a stable government, said External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar this morning. Giving a signal of national unity, Prime Minister Modi will visit Kanyakumari on the culmination of his campaign from the 30th of this month to the 1st of June, when the country will be voting on the last phase of the Lok Sabha polls. Sources have said that in Kanyakumari, the Prime Minister will visit the Rock Memorial and will meditate day and night at the same place where Swami Vivekananda did his meditation at the Dhyan Mandapan from the 30th of this month to the 1st of June. In a scathing accusation against Prime Minister Modi, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi denounced what he described as the erosion of the rule of law in India, citing the recent alleged atrocities against a Dalit family in Madhya Pradesh. Trinamool Congress leader Derek O'Brien also said that the outgoing Lok Sabha has many dubious firsts and accused Prime Minister Modi of turning Parliament into a deep, dark chamber. In a post on X, the parliamentary party leader in the Rajya Sabha also said that this was the first time that no deputy speaker was appointed and the Prime Minister did not answer a single question. Delhi's Rouse Avenue Court has this morning summoned Aam Aadmi Party leader Atishi to appear before it on the 29th of this month in relation to a defamation case filed by the BJP. And 15 Naxalites, 7 of them women, were arrested following the IED blast in Chhattisgarh's Dantewada district. The Naxalites triggered the explosion when the security forces were on a search operation, but no one was injured. Cyclone Remal, which has reportedly claimed over 15 lives and injured several others, is expected to weaken into a well-marked low-pressure area over eastern Assam and its surrounding regions by this evening. A scorching Rajasthan has reached a blistering 50 degrees Celsius in some areas, turning into a real test of endurance for people across India, especially those heading out to cast their votes in the ongoing elections. Dramatic scenes unfolded at the Delhi airport today when passengers aboard a Varanasi-bound Indigo flight were evacuated through emergency exits following a bomb threat. The scare prompted authorities to evacuate all 176 passengers and staff and launch a thorough search of the aircraft. Kolkata Knight Riders co-owner and Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan honored with the special memento by the team's CEO Venki Mysore during the dressing room award ceremony following KKR's triumph in the IPL 2024 final. Mysore highlighted Shah Rukh Khan's presence as a game-changing moment for the entire team. And skipper Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli will look to end India's global title drought as the star duo step out for what is likely to be their final World Cup appearance. The two will have long been the twin torchbearers for the hopes of their cricket-mad nation, which last saw a major title triumph in the 2013 Champions Trophy. To go into the T20 World Cup with their confidence sky high, Pakistan will need to ensure they end up on the winning side in the third 2020 international against England today. England captain Joss Butler will miss their third T20 international against Pakistan for the birth of his third child. And this news out of Cardiff. China has backed Pakistan's probe into the March 26 suicide attack on its engineers in Bisham, saying eliminating terrorism is in the interest of all countries. And as Pakistan observed Yom-e-Takbir, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Acting President Yusuf Raza Gilani hailed the nation's unwavering determination to make Pakistan a nuclear power under the hold leadership of then Premier Nawaz Sharif. Amid an outcry over the alarming use of synthetic drugs among children, it is educational institutions, treasury and opposition lawmakers in the Sindh Assembly that proposed to the government to conduct random drug tests on students to curb the menace among youth. The Islamabad High Court overruled an administrative objection to a petition filed by the PTI against Capital Development Authority's raid on its central secretariat. And as temperatures rose above 52 degrees Celsius in Sindh yesterday, the PDMA has issued an alert for rain, dust storms, and thunderstorms in Punjab and some upper parts of the country during this week. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you, but I do have your financial news coming up in a separate segment in just a minute. Stay with me right here on Community Radio Networks. Let's get you all the financial news that you need to know today to get this short week started. It is Tuesday, the 28th of May. U.S. stock futures have idled today, with techs a bright spot as Wall Street kicked off a holiday-shortened week by focusing on a coming inflation report watched closely by the Federal Reserve. S&P 500 futures were up 0.1%, while contracts on the tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 added 0.2% after solid closing gains on Friday. Futures in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which lists fewer tech names, slipped 0.1%. Nearly 5 months through 2024, the major stock indexes are near record highs. Wall Street doesn't think this rally is over either, as the outlook for earnings and economic growth have steadily risen throughout the year. Jamie Dimon made it clear last week that he sees an end to his time as boss of the biggest U.S. bank, putting a new spotlight on key deputies who are considered frontrunners for his job. The disclosure came during J.P. Morgan Chase's annual Investor Day in Manhattan, where analysts and bank followers gathered to hear about plans for the next year. The White House today will announce steps to modernize a major roadblock to the clean energy transformation: America's aging electrical infrastructure. This new initiative between the feds and 21 states aims to make faster fixes and improvements to the grid, committing to build a bigger and more modern grid as part of a larger effort to reduce power outages and increase electrical transmission capacity, a massive hurdle to getting more clean energy on the grid and reducing the planet-warming pollution causing the climate crisis. After announcing the first ever national drinking standard for forever chemicals last month, the U.S. Environmental Agency has also revealed data that shows nearly 300 of our public water systems exceed the new limits. Senators are pushing to introduce a bill as early as next month that would set rules governing the use of artificial intelligence in the music and movie industries, an effort that coincides with new AI tensions roiling Hollywood. From prestige media outlets to social media users, there has been backlash to the artificial intelligence-generated results that now populate in the valuable online real estate. Multiple outlets, including the New York Times, Ars Technica, and NBC News chronicle the ways in which AI overview messes up. Equity investors are scouring Southeast Asia for alternatives to play the artificial intelligence theme as tech giants pour billions of dollars in infrastructure spending over the next few years. T-Mobile will buy substantially all of the regional carrier United States Cellular's wireless operations in a deal valued at $4.4 billion, according to the telecom giant this morning. As part of the deal, T-Mobile will get U.S. Cellular's customers, stores, and some of its spectrum assets. Verizon was in talks to also buy parts of the regional carrier. T-Mobile will pay $4.4 billion for the assets in a combination of cash and up to $2 billion of debt that it'll assume through an exchange offer to be made to some of U.S. Cellular's debt holders. Elon Musk's AI startup, xAI, announced that it has raised $6 billion in one of the largest venture capital funding rounds of all time. And this could help Musk begin to catch up with ChatGPT maker OpenAI, which he founded before leaving, in a dispute that's become litigious. Some of the xAI investors, such as Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia Capital, also backed OpenAI. Last month, Elon Musk posted on X that President Biden obviously barely knows what's going on. He's just a tragic front for a far-left political machine, he wrote. It was the 29th time this year that he had posted about the U.S. president on X. He has steadily ramped up his criticism of President Biden as the campaign season heats up before the November elections. GameStop Corporation shares extended gains in pre-market trading today after the video game retailer said it brought in nearly $1 billion from a share sale program amid renewed interest for the so-called meme stock. Shares of the Grapevine, Texas-based company rose 27% in pre-market trading today, putting the stock on track to gain $1.6 billion in market capitalization. Meme stock GameStop soaring nearly 25% in pre-market trading after the struggling video game retailer said it had raised over $900 million from selling its shares during the market rally earlier this month. Apple Inc.'s iPhone staged a rebound in China last month, with shipments rising 52% amid a flurry of discounts from retail partners. And Target has revamped its grocery aisle since the COVID-19 pandemic, with items ranging from Korean foods and mocktails to barbecue-flavored trail mix, as the discount retailer caters to shoppers who want to experiment while sticking to a budget. OpenAI says it's setting up a new safety and security committee and has begun training a new artificial intelligence model to supplant the GPT-4 system that underpins its ChatGPT chatbot. And the San Francisco startup said in a blog post this morning that the committee will advise the full board on critical safety and security decisions for its projects and operations. The iconic Home Alone house has hit the market once again, and this time boasting a complete renovation listed for $5.25 million. This beloved property, made famous by the 1990 holiday film, is attracting considerable attention. It is located in the Chicago suburb of Winnetka in Illinois and has been carefully updated to blend modern conveniences with the timeless charm that captivated audiences more than 3 decades ago. A new report is offering insight into where you should move after you retire, examining the top U.S. cities with the highest retirement income. And the study comes and found that the top city for retirement income in the nation is Arlington, Virginia, where the average retirement income is $90,140. Second and third on the list is Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the Woodlands in Texas. And a recent survey has identified the dirtiest cities in America, highlighting Houston, Texas as the top offender. The study conducted has ranked cities based by several factors, including pollution levels, infrastructure for waste management, and overall cleanliness. Houston now holds the title of the dirtiest city in the U.S., having overtaken Newark, New Jersey, which topped the list last year. Expectations were met as travelers showed up at airports across the country, with the TSA announcing that it screened more than 2.95 million airline passengers, a new single-day record, and that was on Friday. For the first time, officials have detected bird flu in beef, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Officials with the USDA shared that the H5N1 virus was found as part of the testing of 96 dairy cows that were diverted from the supply because federal inspectors noticed that they were showing signs of illness while inspecting them. And deforestation in Brazil's Cerrado region, a vast tropical savanna renowned for its rich biodiversity, increased sharply last year and overtook that of the Amazon. It extends through central Brazil into neighboring Paraguay and Bolivia. More than 1.11 million hectares were destroyed last year, an increase of 68% compared to the previous year. And these losses represent almost 2/3 of the deforestation suffered by all of Brazil and about 2.4 times the destruction recorded in the Amazon. Soccer star David Beckham will promote Alibaba's international e-commerce platform AliExpress in its biggest global brand ambassador partnership to date. The deal comes against the backdrop of China-based rivals PDD Holdings, Temu, and online fashion startup Shein's rapid global expansion, with the former also advertising at the Super Bowl to gain traction with the U.S. customers. China has set up the country's largest ever semiconductor investment fund to propel development of the domestic chip industry, the latest effort from Beijing to achieve self-sufficiency as the U.S. seeks to restrict its growth. Vehicle manufacturer Toyota is set to end its massive sponsorship deal with the International Olympic Committee after this year's Paris Olympics. And 3 of Japan's biggest car makers, Toyota, Mazda, and Subaru, announced this morning their commitment to develop new and smaller engines tailored to electrification in the pursuit of carbon neutrality. And with these engines, the companies will aim to optimize integration with motors, batteries, and other electric drive units. An engine reborn, and that's how Japanese automaker Toyota introduced plans to cast a futuristic spin on the traditional internal combustion engine. During a 3-hour presentation at a Tokyo hall today, the car manufacturer giant announced it would offer lean, compact engines that also run on so-called green fuels like hydrogen and bioethanol, or get paired with zero-emissions electric motors in hybrids. Recent visitors to Vietnam have likely marveled at the newly soaring skylines of the capital of Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh City or Saigon, the biggest urban area in what has been for 2 decades one of the fastest growing economies in the world and a hub for the likes of Intel and Samsung. Global investment bank Goldman Sachs has raised India's GDP growth forecast for the calendar year 24 to 6.7%, citing robust indicators that point to the growth momentum sustaining, but pushed back its forecast by a quarter for the Reserve Bank of India to move on interest rates. Reliance Industries, operator of the world's biggest refining complex, has signed a one-year deal with Russia's Rosneft to buy at least 3 million barrels of oil a month in rubles. The shift to ruble payments follows Russian President Putin's push from Moscow and its trading partners to find alternatives to the Western financial system to facilitate trade despite US and European sanctions. Indian equity benchmark indices BSE and Sensex and the Nifty 50 moved up in trade today. While BSE Sensex urged over 100 points, the Nifty 50 was near 23,000. Silver has outperformed gold in domestic and international markets by a margin of around 10 percentage points over a year. However, returns from silver in the domestic market are lagging the international ones, even as the rupee has weakened, while returns on gold are nearly identical in domestic and international markets. 3 companies from India's 2 largest conglomerates are looking to raise funds amid their growth plans. Adani Energy Solutions, earlier known as Adani Transmission, plans to sell shares worth 12,500 crore rupees to institutional investors, while the board of its sister company, Adani Enterprises, will meet today to consider raising fresh capital. The Reserve Bank of India has imposed penalties on ICICI Bank and Yes Bank as a crore rupees and 91 lakh rupees respectively, for violation of norms. The Varanasi Ropeway project, India's first urban ropeway venture, is making significant progress, with the segment connecting Varanasi Cantonment Railway Station to Rath Yatra slated for completion by August of this year. And this project falls under the National Ropeways Development Program known as Parvatmala Pariyojana. The UPSC has announced the commencement of recruitment for more than 300 vacant positions across various posts in India, and this recruitment drive offers an opportunity for eligible candidates to join prestigious positions in different government departments. The repatriation of profits and dividends on foreign investments surged year on year by 251% during the first 10 months of the current fiscal year, reflecting the State Bank of Pakistan's relaxed policy towards dollar outflows. And reversing an earlier decision of the federal cabinet, the Economic Coordination Committee in Islamabad ordered continuous supply of gas to Punjab-based 2 fertilizer plants at existing rates. And the government is expected to revoke tax concessions in Islamabad that disproportionately benefit high-earning individuals over the middle-class workforce. Federal Minister for Planning, Development and Reform, Ehsan Iqbal, has put his weight behind the formal domestic package fruit juice industry, assuring the manufacturers that he would push for the abolition of 20% federal excise duty on its products in the upcoming budget. And the federal government plans to deregulate milk, beef and mutton prices by stopping monitoring them, leaving consumers at the mercy of the market players' demand and supply mechanism. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you. I do have the final segment of your program coming up in just a minute. Stay with us. Before I get you the stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, the 28th of May, I do have huge thanks going out to Discount Power, to Houston EB5, to the Ahluwalia Law Offices for their support of community radio networks. Also thanks going out to the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, Kinza Law, as well as Michaelachi, Ruchi Palace by Michaelachi, Sri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flash Brush Productions. Now, it was a massive Spanish fleet known as the Invincible Armada that set sail from Lisbon on a mission to secure control of the English Channel and transport a Spanish invasion army to Britain from the Netherlands. Happened on today's date in 1588. Queen Elizabeth's support of the Dutch rebels in the Spanish Netherlands led King Philip II of Spain to plan this conquest of England and re-establish Catholicism out there. This giant Spanish invasion fleet was completed by 1587, but Sir Francis Drake's daring raid on the port of Cadiz delayed the Armada's departure until today's date in 1588. The Invincible Armada consisted of 130 ships and carried 2,500 guns and 30,000 men, two-thirds of them soldiers. And delayed by storms, the Armada did not reach the southern coast of England until late July. By that time, the British were ready. And on the 28th of May in 1830, President Andrew Jackson signs the Indian Removal Act into law. The bill enabled the federal government to negotiate with southeastern Native American tribes for their ancestral lands in states such as Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. And as a result, some 60,000 Native Americans were forced westward into Indian Territory, which is present-day Oklahoma. The mass migration resulted in more than 4,000 deaths and became known as the Trail of Tears. That was President Andrew Jackson signing the Indian Removal Act into law on today's date in the year 1830. Of course, some tribes, including the Cherokees, refused to leave their homes and were pushed out by the U.S. military between 1838 and 39. And thousands of Native Americans died traveling thousands of miles through harsh weather towards unknown territory they were to call home. And by the year 1840, nearly all Native American tribes were driven west, and the Indian Removal Act had achieved its purpose. John Steinbeck's first successful novel, called Tortilla Flat, is published on today's date in 1935. He was a native Californian and had studied writing intermittently at Stanford between 1920 and 25, but never graduated. Moved to New York and worked as a manual laborer and a journalist while writing his first two novels, which were not successful. Married and moved back to California and is with his wife, and his father, a government official in Salinas, gave the couple a house while Steinbeck continued writing. And Tortilla Flat described the antics of several drifters who share a house in California. The novel's endearing comic tone captured the public's imagination, and the novel became a financial success. Published on today's date in the year 1935. And his works after that, Dubious Battle of Mice and Men, both successful. And in 1938, his masterpiece, The Grapes of Wrath, was published. And the novel about the struggles of an Oklahoma family who lose their farm and become fruit pickers in California won a Pulitzer Prize in 1939. On the 20th of May in 1936, a killer is convicted on the basis of a single horse hair. The equine strand was the decisive clue in the rape murder of Nancy Titterton in New York City. A novelist and the wife of NBC executive Louis Titterton was raped and strangled in her upscale home on Beekman Place on the morning of the 10th of April in 1936. And the only clues left behind were a foot-long piece of cord that had been used to tie her hands and a single horsehair found on her bedspread. These small traces of evidence had proved to be enough to find the killer, and the detective in charge of the investigation had ordered his team to trace the source of that cord. After a full week of combing every rope and twine manufacturer in the Northeast, that cord was finally found to have come from Hanover Cordage Company in New York, Pennsylvania. And company records showed that some of the distinctive cord had been sold to Theodore Kruger's upholstery shop in New York City. And caught by surprise, it was a person called Fiorenza who confessed to the brutal crime but claimed that he was temporarily insane. This defense didn't hold up too well at the trial, and he was executed in 1937. But it was on today's date in 1936 that this killer is convicted on the basis of that single horse hair. And on the 28th of May in 1937, the government of Germany, then under the control of Adolf Hitler of the Nationalist Socialist Nazi Party, forms a new state-owned automobile company, then known as Gesellschaft Verarbeitung des Deschon Volkswagen. Later this year, it was renamed simply Volkswagen Work, or the People's Car Company. Volkswagen, ladies and gentlemen, was founded on today's date in the year 1937. And on the 28th of May 1957, National League owners vote unanimously to allow the New York Giants and Brooklyn Dodgers to move to San Francisco and Los Angeles, respectively, at the mid-season owners' meeting in Chicago, Illinois. There were, however, conditions attached to the owners' decision. And it was basketball owners allowing the Dodgers and Giants to move on today's date in 1957. And in 1961, the British newspaper, the London Observer, publishes British lawyer Peter Benenson's article, The Forgotten Prisoners, on its front page, launching the Appeal for Amnesty 1961, a campaign calling for the release of all people imprisoned in various parts of the world because of the peaceful expression of their beliefs. The movement later became Amnesty International. Appeal for Amnesty, that campaign was launched on today's date in 1961. Now we know it as Amnesty International. And on the 20th of May 1964, the PLO was founded, the Palestine Liberation Organization. In February of 1969, Yasser Arafat was elected as its leader, and by 1974, when he addressed the UN, Arafat made some significant strides towards establishing new respectability for the PLO's campaign for a Palestinian homeland. But gaining legitimacy hinged on cooling down terrorism, and Arafat found it increasingly difficult. He could not reconcile the moderate and extremist segments of Palestinian politics, but the Palestine Liberation Organization was founded on today's date, the 28th of May, 1964. Irene Cara's song, Flashdance, What a Feeling, goes to the top of the US pop charts on today's date in 1983.
Seems to hide deep inside your mind. All alone I have cried silent tears full of pride.
She not only played the starring role of Coco in the movie Fame, but also recorded not one but two Oscar-nominated songs for it earlier. Her biggest impact as a musician came, though, with her work on the movie Flashdance, the first collaboration between producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. At number one, a pop hit with the Flashdance theme. At Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, falls to forces of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, formally ending 17 years of Marxist rule in the East African country. Happened on today's date, and that was the Ethiopian capital falling to rebels, ending 17 years of Marxist rule. In 1974, the leader of Ethiopia was deposed in a military coup, and Ethiopia's new ruler set up a Marxist regime, executed thousands of their political opponents, and aligned themselves with the Soviet Union. War with Somalia and severe droughts during the 1980s brought famine to the Ethiopian people, leading to considerable internal strife and independence movements in the regions of Eritrea and Tigray. And it was in 1991, on today's date, in the midst of ceasefire talks, that tanks entered Addis Ababa virtually unopposed. Soon after, a transition government was formed with Meles Zenawi as its president, and in July, a new democratic constitution was drafted and Eritrean independence was acknowledged without incident. Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, falls to rebels, ending 17 years of Marxist rule on today's date in 1991. And in 1998, the comedian and actor Phil Hartman, famous for his work on Saturday Night Live and news radio, is shot to death by his wife. In a murder-suicide, he was 49 years old. He earned a spot on the long-running NBC sketch comedy show Saturday Night Live. In his 8 years on the show, he became known for his spot-on impersonations of a variety of celebrities, notably President Bill Clinton. And it is the comic Phil Hartman, who was killed by his wife on today's date in 1998. And in 2006, the San Francisco Giants outfielder Barry Bonds hits a 90 miles per hour fast ball from the Colorado Rockies' Byung-Hun Kim over the center field fence for his 715th career home run to pass Babe Ruth for the second most home runs in MLB history. It was Barry Bonds hitting that home run to pass Babe Ruth on the MLB list. Happened on today's date in 2006. And as Friday prayers came to a close on the 28th of May in 2010 in Lahore in Pakistan, 7 terrorists wielded guns, grenades, and suicide vests stormed into 2 crowded Ahmadi Muslim mosques and opened fire, killing 94 victims and injuring more than 120. The coordinated attacks took place just minutes apart. At the Baitul Noor Mosque in Model Town, an upscale neighborhood in Lahore, people ran for their lives as 3 gunmen entered with AK-47 assault rifles and grenades, opening fire on security personnel and worshippers alike. The attack lasted more than an hour as the attackers shot into the horrified crowd. 27 people were killed right away. And several miles away, near Lahore's main railway station, another 3 attackers barged into Darul Zakir Mosque with the same destructive intentions. They sprayed bullets into the congregation and took several hundred people hostage. And a 3-hour standoff ensued as people and terrorists exchanged gunfire. 2 of the attackers then detonated their suicide vests, killing 67 people. The victims of the attacks were buried in Rabwa, the home to the Ahmadis' religious headquarters. Although Pakistani ministers, politicians, and other prominent figures issued statements of condemnation towards the attackers and their actions, none of them attended the services, likely due to fear of political and religious backlash for publicly supporting the much maligned sect. Unfortunately, threats and violence are nothing new for them. They are always met with discrimination from majority Muslim sects, and though the Ahmadi consider themselves Muslim, Pakistani law does not. Even an act as simple as declaring themselves Muslim is considered blasphemy under the law and can be punished with fines, prison time, or death. Sunni Muslim conservatives have led a recent campaign to ostracize the Ahmadis, and Sunni extremists have made them the targets of violence in many instances also. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the stories from the annals of history, and that's my show for today. For those of you who'd like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754.